You never know how much time you have. For me, that stopped being an idea and became reality on August 22nd, 2021. The doctors put me on a ventilator and told my wife to call hospice so she could prepare for the day they planned to pull the plug. 6 weeks later, I woke up to an entirely different reality. I could not walk, I could not talk, I could not even lift my own arm. And I woke up realizing something else. I had not made the right preparations for my family. The plans I thought were pretty good fell through when it mattered most. That is why Fiduciary Alchemy welcomes voices that would have warned me about the holes in my plans. My hope is that you live a long and prosperous life, but I also hope you make better plans than I did. So tune in, take notes, and stay with us through the end when Bluesman Grindle and the Compliance Choir bring a word of caution.
Today, I want to welcome Richard Parker. He is the founder of Roy Street Advisors. Richard is an accomplished investment banking executive with a career spanning over 30 years and 1,000 transactions. Before founding Roy Street Advisors, Richard served as managing director of P Squared, a private equity firm funded by the Dalio family office. He's also the author of How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. It's a series and a course that has been used successfully by business buyers in over 80 countries. Richard's unwavering dedication to excellence and his ability to foster stronger relationships with key stakeholders has positioned him as a leading authority in the M&A arena for the lower middle market. And I would say for those listening, at some point, if you own a business, at some point you're going to sell it, and it's probably the most valuable thing that you have. And everything I understand is it's a incredibly easy transaction to screw up. And so you need people like Richard in your life to make sure you don't screw it up and you maximize that value to you and your family. Richard, welcome.
Good morning. How are you? Nice to be with you. I
That's
had a
good.
good chuckle when you said it's a very easy transaction to screw up. It could be a very easy transaction, yes, but it's very easy to screw up if you don't do it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many details. Little things, little snippets. And one of the things I love about podcasting is I get to talk to people like you. And I just learned so much through the process. But I remember sitting in something and it was some investment bankers and they were just giving some general guidance. And they said, hey, be careful about taking distributions out of your business. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought that's why I had a business was to take distributions. And they're like, no, no, buyers are going to look at that and they're going to conclude that you don't believe your business is the best thing to invest in.
Yep. That's a very that's very sage advice. Now, of course, you're in business. The business should work for you. You're in business to make money, amongst other things. Um, but when you talk about distributions, you want to be the beneficiary of your hard work. However, especially in the first few years, there's so much, the return is so much better keeping your lifestyle at a reasonable level as your business continues to grow and keep plowing money back into your business because the math is so simple. Businesses sell at a multiple regardless of the level. So whether that be, one time or 15 times the earnings, when you plow, let's just pick an arbitrary number, 5 times, when you plow the money back into the business and grow the business for every dollar of growth that you generate, you're going to get $5 back. So the math is obscene how easy it is. I mean, it's almost, I mean, it's almost dumb math, meaning the return is so incredible. And the investment bankers that you spoke to, yes, I mean, it is a sign, what better investment than your own business, and buyers want to see that you believe in it. So and that's a huge problem that I see constantly about people have not put the proper investment into their business, have not built their best, especially in smaller companies, where they just haven't put growth or capital in the business to make it a better business, a more sellable business, investing in people, processes, procedures, not putting in second level of management. All these things come with putting money back into your business.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy named John Spolstra. If his name sounds familiar, his son is the coach of the Miami
I was just
Miami
going to say,
Heat.
I know the last name because I think there's a Spoelstra. I'm not a basketball fan. I'm a hockey
Yeah.
fan, but there's a Spoelstra who's a coach of the Miami Heat. Yeah.
Yeah, well, his dad, genius marketer, he was president of the Portland Timberwolves for most of the 80s until, oh heck, I just drew a blank, the Microsoft guy, Paul Allen
Paul
bought.
Allen. Yeah.
Yeah, and he and Paul had different opinion on how to do things, and one of them was the owner, and John wasn't. And so John moved on.
Yeah. It's the golden rule, right? He with the gold makes the rules.
But John talks about how, when he was working with different folks to grow their organization, he had trouble convincing them to hire salespeople. And he tells one story about how when he was over in Spain, he he said, "Hey, if anybody will give me €1, I'll give you €10 in return." And everybody looked around like,
There's got to be a gimmick, right?
yeah. Finally, somebody got bold and gave him €1, and he gave me, all right, here's your €10. He's like, any other takers? And somebody came up and he did that like 3 times. He's like, now this seems pretty simple, right? And they're like, yeah. Why aren't you hiring salespeople? If you hire the right salespeople, it's that reinvestment in the business.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And it's where people go go wrong related to salespeople. It's a it's a trailing benefit. I didn't want to say a trailing expense, meaning you hire salespeople, assuming you hire the right one. It takes them a little while to gain some traction, to generate some revenue. And so the tendency by people that are not sales oriented or don't see the value. Someone starts off in 3 months, they haven't generated anything meaningful, and they say, well, there's not a good salesperson, whatever. But you could be in an industry where, it takes 6 months or 12 months to start getting, your pipeline going, and then orders start to feed in. There's just a lot of short-term thinking, and that's why every big business started off as a small business, but there's also a reason why there's infinitely more small businesses than big businesses because some of them just can't get out of their own way. And it's small time thinking. And so they remain small businesses. And there's salespeople, perfect example. Whatever it may be, if they're not investing in and seeing that there's benefit, no matter how technology can provide some tremendous help to people today, and provide you with systems and processes that you wouldn't normally have the benefit of for reasonable amounts. But ultimately, you need great people, no matter what the business is. You need great people, and if you're not going to put the right people into place and hire people to help you build the business. I mean, it was a big problem of mine in my own businesses that I owned early on in my career. And then when the light finally goes on, you realize that you've got you need people. I mean, it's just it's an overused term, but there's no escaping it. No matter AI, tech, whatever, you need people.
Well, I experienced this. I was on the losing end of this a number of years back. We were doing the marketing for an RIA, and we took them from 18 million in revenue to 60 million in revenue in a year and a half.
What is an RIA?
I'm sorry,
Registered
registered.
investment account. Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Yeah,
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 yeah, wealth manager,
yeah.
and 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 they decided they were going to sell their firm, and they saw me as an expense, and so they cut me. I mean, we multiplied their revenue by tens of millions of dollars, and they cut my meager fees to get ready for an
Happens
acquisition.
all the time. I mean, I did an article recently, I think it was for Forbes, and talking about how, there's, we are talking about what people, I remember what it was. There was a question that came to us, and I made a quick clip about what do I look at immediately when I evaluate a business that would cause me to disregard it immediately. And there's a couple of points. And what I'd say, I look for consistency in cheating. And when I talk consistency of numbers, etc., margins, revenues, and then I talked about cheating, where when you look at financial statements, you could see oftentimes where a business owner recognizes that they want to start selling their business. And you see them, for example, payroll and marketing are the two most common line items that they will reduce in an effort to make their numbers look better and in preparation for selling their business. And when you think about it logically, they're the two most ridiculous things that they should be cutting. So, someone they have an employee and the employee leaves or gets fired or whatever the case may be, and they say, you know what? We're thinking about selling this business in the next, bring it to market in the next 6, 12 months. Let's see how we can do without them. Or marketing. They say, we'll cut stuff back a little bit. The marketing's working pretty well. And, as you know, marketing, like sales, it takes time to catch up. So they'll cut those items and saying like the thinking is so polluted. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I mean, it sounds crazy to someone who thinks logically, but I see it all the time.
Well, when buyers are looking at this,
Yes.
do they see this, or are
Good
they
ones
full?
do.
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is when you evaluate financials of a business, you want to get a few years, let's say 3 years of financials, and you want to have them on, your P&Ls, for example, and you want to have them side by side so that your line items of all your expenses, all revenue, expenses, etc., line up year over year, so you can compare and contrast years, and you look for changes. I like to explain it to people as following. I'm a big fly fisherman. I do a lot less now. I'm living in Florida because I don't like ocean fly fishing. I used to be a big river fisherman. And when I went to try to fish for Atlantic salmon the first time, like because the salmon just come up above the water, they sort of crush the fly, and then because they don't feed on them, and anyways, I was getting so frustrated. 2 days, and guys, the guide and buddy I was fishing would say, there's one," or you got to rise, you got to rise. And I can't see it for the life of me. I don't even know what they're talking about. The water looks black, and like your line's 50, 70 feet out or 60 feet, whatever it may be. And I said, like, I don't see it. Then my buddy said to me, just look for a disturbance in the water. Like as you're looking where your fly is, because it's usually underwater a little bit, as it's making its pass, just look for like a disturbance in the water. Look in the general area. And after that, boom, boom. Not I don't want to boast too much because I wasn't catching them like boom, boom, but I was hooking fish. And so I tell people, look for a disturbance. Think about it that way. You want to look for a disturbance in the waters. You look at financial statements, something that looks odd, it sticks out. Even if it's something, insurance was 100,000, 120,000, suddenly went to 450,000. Well, why is insurance going up? Is it common in those industries? Is it something that's going to continue? Marketing, was X amount, and suddenly it's X minus 30%, or the employee count changes dramatically, or margins. Like just that's why when you line them up, you look for a disturbance, something that just sticks out as being not ordinary or unusual.
Yeah.
And you can find them fast. I mean, because they're numbers. Numbers don't lie. People lie. Numbers don't lie. They are what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does surprise me when I see people do that. But let me ask this. When someone's evaluating a business, what's kind of the standard list of things that they're looking through? What are the things they're looking for to say, hey, you know what, this is a business I want to buy?
Well, the first thing they typically do is go to the financials, which is understandable. But in reality, the financials should be the fastest part of your evaluation because they're numbers. As I just mentioned, they are or they aren't. They don't lie. They're numbers. And so you want to make sure, for me anyways, I want to see that the revenue is either stable or increasing. I want to see that the gross margins are either stable or increasing. I want to see that expenses relative to revenues are either stable or dropping, meaning expenses are going down relative to revenue, because your expenses should drop as your revenue goes up. I mean, there's certain fixed expenses. And then you know, so that's on the numbers part. And again, I encourage people, that's a relatively quick exercise. What you really need to determine is this a good business going forward? Right? Are all the economic conditions in place? What can come out of the woodwork that could really hurt this business? Are there any red flags? What keeps the owner up at night? Are there any customer concentration issues? Are there any issues that could deem this business to be, a dinosaur in a short period of time? All those things related, who are the competitors, any critical employees, any licenses held. And again, I go back to also the concentration, any critical issues related to concentration. And ultimately, most importantly, above everything else, if you're going to be an owner operator, are you the right fit to own this business? Because in smaller businesses, typically it's, um, Bob owns the business. Jennifer's buying the business. Bob's going to leave. Jennifer takes Bob's seat. So she's going to be an owner operator. And if that's what you're going to be doing, you have to make sure that the business fits your skill set because all the other stuff is important. But if you do a relatively good job on all the other stuff, but you screw up matching your skill set to the right business, you're going to go out of business. Conversely, if you do a flawless job making sure you match your greatest skill set to a business that utilizes that to drive the revenue and profits, you do a flawless job on that, and you're doing like an average job on all the other diligencing, you're going to, by and large, you're going to be okay because you are the right owner of the business.
Yeah. One of the things I was a part of an M&A. I was being acquired. It was a Bain Capital transaction. And one of the things I've seen is it's really hard to keep the people, and they had a really nice retention bonus plan for me. They paid out the first tranche in advance, hoping I'd buy something nice and be locked in for a year. I'm Scottish, so I didn't. And I lasted, I think, 3 months. I wrote a check, walked into my boss's office, and I said, Dave, I just can't do this. I'm sorry. And that's one of the things that happens, so many times, at least in my observation, is it's hard keeping the people because the acquiring organization has a different culture that was incompatible with the people you hired. How do you manage that?
Well, there's management from it depends what side you're on, right? If you're an institutional buyer, like a private equity firm making an acquisition, you, by nature, they're not operators. I mean, and I deal with a lot of private equity people in my world, and I happily tell them that most of them couldn't run a lemonade stand as from an operational standpoint, but they're very good from an acquisition standpoint. So the better firms, the better institutional buyers that are not going to be operational, family offices, private equity firms, the better ones are smart enough to know that they're buying people and they don't want to mess with the culture. When they mess with the culture, if there's a reason why they're buying the business, unless we're talking about distressed businesses, which is not my area, but if you're buying a good business and you're trying to grow that business as an institutional buyer with the idea of, eventually or exiting again in 3, 5, 7 years, you're buying culture and you're smart enough to know you don't mess with it. You just don't. I mean, you take care of the people, take care of them really, really well, give them an incentive, make sure all the deals that I do now, there's like a management pool, so they can own equity in the business. The older, stereotypical PE acquisition really is not common anymore. They recognize they've got to add value. They don't bring much to relate it to the culture. They could do stuff in the back end. So the better buyers pay attention to it. The dumb buyers will screw it up regardless. I mean, it just happens, but it doesn't happen in a lot of cases because the
Oh,
buyers are better.
yeah. Well, and one of my sayings, this is something I've developed more recently. I'd say, PE destroys all things that are good and virtuous. When I see them do acquisitions, they go in, they cut customer service, they gut the business of what made it great.
I don't agree with that. That's really it's really not the case. It's really
Okay.
not.
No,
Yeah.
cool. Tell me.
Yeah. No, it's not the case. I mean, I think that's, it's more like it happened 2 decades ago. It just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, when you, and especially in the middle market where these are people-centric businesses or they're businesses that they want to grow. It's not a dice and slice or slash mentality. They go in. As a matter of fact, the majority of transactions that I've done over the last number of years, it's the complete opposite. They go in, they want to make sure everybody's well taken care of. They're going to put in more money. And I'm not sitting here trying to be the cheerleader for private equity, but I don't see it in the world that I operate because the better PE firms don't operate that way. They don't look to, one of the greatest quotes that I ever heard, which was very, very early in my career, which was, you can save your way to solvency, but you market your way to success. And it was a guy with the Bank of Montreal who was a consultant. His name was Stu McClellan. And And I see that all the time with the right institutional buyers. They market their way ahead. They're putting in growth capital. They want to put the right processes, systems, procedures. Now they will drive you absolutely bonkers related to reporting because they got tons of, some of them have tons of portfolio companies. They want all the reporting to be consistent. But operationally, they're not slicing and dicing. They're throwing money at it to grow it.
Hmm. And yeah, I think one of the fears that people, selling their business has is if they sell it, will whoever buy it screw up their life's work?
Correct. Yeah,
What would you tell those folks?
it's possible. So there's three things really that a business owner has to think about, and um, none of them are none of them are more important than the other. There's three things that a business owner has to think about before they sell. And I always like to ask them, like, is the business ready to be sold? And that could take a lot of work. And are you ready to sell? Because there's three things that they need to think about, and why are they selling it? And sometimes it's a combination of all three. Okay, so there's the money part. And for many business owners, hey, listen, I've got to this point in my life. I've worked hard. I'm 63 years old. I've had enough. I want to sell this business. I just want as much money as possible. I want to get the hell out and ride off into the sunset. And there's nothing wrong with that. Then there's the other ones who say, look, for me, legacy is really important. I've built this business, this is blood, sweat, tears, and beers over the last, 3 decades, and I've got great people, and I want to make sure what I've built is taken care of and my people are taken care of. And that's the legacy. So there's the money one, there's the legacy one. And the third part is, determining what you're going to do after, because many business owners, small business owners especially, their entire identity is tied to their business. They can't even have a conversation with some people without talking about their business. They have nothing else. They don't have hobbies. They've neglected other relationships, and so everything their entire identity is tied up to the business. So for those people, it's, well, what are you going to do? You know, on day one, meaning day one after you transition out, you may stay for a while to help, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life? So there's really those three things that are really um, the bumper stickers of what's important to a business owner. And it's really, when I say important, it's very important that they understand what's most important to them and tailor a deal accordingly. Because it's not just a case of always about the money. The money plays a significant role, but if it is legacy, and it is for many people, then the buyer has to be the right buyer. And there's certain things that you could put into place to make sure that they hopefully don't screw up the business, as far as who's going to operate it and how it's going to be funded, and making sure that people are going to be staying in place. And maybe you as an owner want to stay for a meaningful transition for a year or two, or what have you. But there's no guarantees in life. I mean, is it possible that they could screw it up? Of course they are. Of course there is. But you get the sense of who the buyer is, whether it's an individual or an institution or a PE firm or competitor, what have you, by really having a lot of good engagement with them during this process, and establish good, meaningful conversation, a good, meaningful relationship, and you understand how they operate. Because the more personalized you can make the conversations and the interaction, the more often people will drop their guard down. And so they may tell you certain things. There's people in my world of investment banking that say, and I hear it almost every day, institutional buyers will say anything they need to say in order to tie up a good business and get an LOI. And it could be true, but when you have enough conversations with people, the truth typically comes out about how they think about the business, and you want to make sure that there's a connection between you and how they perceive what your company should look like and what they're going to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say is a good process for figuring that out, to getting to that point of transparency? Because usually, I mean, you know how it goes. You get in the meetings about the meetings about the business. How do you get to know about the buyer?
It's a great question. Um, the first thing is, especially if we're talking on an individual, if you're selling your business to an individual buyer, you can have that just through good social interaction. Ask them to have dinner. Also, bringing their spouse along. Invite them to a family event. Try to make it as social as possible, without infringing upon the deal and the sensitivity of the deal, for example. But with an individual buyer, it's easier. With an institutional buyer, the way I find that it works pretty well is, very often institutional buyers, they bring They're bringing a whole team to every meeting. Like
Yeah.
it's like the SWAT team for every meeting. And what I tell my clients is, hey, curb that. Who's the big guy? Who's the big guy or two? And then have them meet with them frequently on an individual basis. So you have those conversations, meet with the team members, have your team members meet with them. Don't rely, especially they're, you're going to have, you have VPs or whatever the case may be, your second tier of management, that may be the next level of management taking over and running the company that they're betting on. Have those folks meet with the buyers. I mean, you can't keep the deal secret. I mean, the buyers are going to want to meet with those people that they're betting on, right? And so, have uh, try to establish meaningful relationships as much as possible outside of the nuts and bolts of the deal. And that comes in with just good conversation and social interactions as often as possible.
Well, you were talking when we were in the green room. You obviously have done a lot of work in Hong Kong. I've worked a lot in Japan, and one of the things that's common in Japan is if you have a meeting the night before, you have dinner, and the culture is you do not talk work at dinner. It is everything but work.
Yes.
Is is
Yeah, it's
that
a
possible?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you'll see, like, especially if it relates to private equity, they always want to have dinner with my clients, either
Okay.
before the meeting or after. But you know, I appreciate the way you're saying that because I also found that when I was doing business in Asia, I loved the socialization aspect of it, and not from a standpoint it was like just we were out partying. It wasn't that. It was the whole thing about there was the pomp and circumstance and an orchestration of the whole. The dinner before was part of the meeting. They didn't
Yeah.
discuss business, but that was part of everything, right? Like this is the way you cultivate a relationship with someone. There is the dinner and they take you to a real nice place and there's a discussion with the server or whoever it is about, what the meal is going to look like and the preparation and they want to, order whatever you want, drink whatever you want. And again, not talking any business because they put a very high value on the relationship. That's a very different dynamic than North America, and
Yeah.
specifically in the US, where it's go, 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 and everything is about commercialization. It's difficult to even have an in-person meeting with people today.
Yeah.
Like in my world, there's an advantage because, years ago you'd have to meet with someone in person 5, 10 times before you get engagement. Now I have clients globally. I've never even met them in person. But anytime I have an opportunity to meet with someone face to face, they say we want to have a Zoom call, and they're in Miami, and I'm up the road in Boca Raton. I say no, no, I'll come to Miami. There's no problem. And part of that is from I think that Asian training because when you get that, if you can connect with someone
Yeah.
it's much easier to do business with them. And especially in the point that you brought up about business owners, they want to have the right person buy their business.
Yeah.
And they'll oftentimes, if the legacy is really important to them and culture really important to them, the deal terms and the money and the cash they get at closing, of course, that's critically important. But they will be much more open-minded to sell the business to somebody or to the deal terms in order to sell it to the business as someone that they know is going to take care of their business.
Yeah.
I think it's a good lesson for people who are listening that the dinner before thing and no business talk is just like, hey, I just want to get to know you and I want you to get to know me.
Yeah, and to your point, if you're doing that in North America, you probably have to somehow mention that because you don't have to tell the Japanese, hey, we're not
Sadly, yeah, you're right. You don't have to tell the Japanese they're already doing it. Yes, I agree.
right. Well, hey, we've talked a lot about the back end of selling a business. Before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about the front end, people, buying a business.
Yep.
And that can be kind of scary. That can be kind of daunting, and you're kind of rolling the dice big. What's your take on that?
Well, there's a couple of things because when you're talking about individuals acquiring a business, and I've spent a lot of time on the buy side and written a lot of courses, did webinars, and lots of uh, lots of teaching on that side. So with individuals, it becomes quite frightening. The one thing I do tell people, we discussed it before, and is buying a business or becoming an entrepreneur is doable by anybody. It's just being having the focus and the commitment to doing it. It can be daunting if you do it in a methodical manner, educate yourself, Make sure that it's almost like the flip side of selling. You know, the preparation is really important, making sure your deal team is lined up. You don't have to be spending a whole lot of money. Businesses take capital, personal capital, doesn't take a ton of personal capital, but making sure you get in touch with, you know, what your greatest skill set is to make sure it's tied up to you match it with the right business. So there's 23 steps in the process actually of acquiring a business and an individual for an individual. And so as long as you do it, you know, it seems daunting at the beginning, but if you reduce it to bite-sized pieces, it's very doable. But you know, the internet, social media, AI has been the most destructive force for individual business acquisitions. It's
Huh.
it's horrible because there's so much generic information out there. There's so much misinformation and disinformation, and people tend to believe that, you know, they can get these snippets of information at various sources and put together their thoughts and go down the process of buying a business, and it just doesn't work. And that's why, like in the small business transactions, you know, Main Street USA or lower market, the numbers are absolutely horrific. 94% of the people who begin to search to buy a business never complete a transaction.
You know, it's really interesting when you say that about AI. Yesterday, my brother-in-law was over, and we were just chatting. He's a software developer, very senior. He works on
Hmm.
the kernel. Um, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, if you and I are using the same AI, is the code that I generate as good as the code you generate?" And he said, "Absolutely not." And so the
There you
AI,
go. There you go.
yeah. And it sounds like that's some of what you're saying. It's not
Yeah.
that AI is intrinsically bad. It needs to be driven by the right operator.
It needs to be driven by the right operator, and exactly that. And individuals should realize they should, you know, you get a lot of these communities and again, I'm talking individual business buyers. You get a lot of these communities where individual business buyers are talking to each other. There's some platforms where there's, you know, thousands of prospective business buyers on there. And what you have thousands of people with no money, no experience, no track record, and no clue how to buy a business. And they're asking questions to a whole series of people who have no money, no track record, no experience, and no clue. So it's like the blind leading the blind versus saying, I've worked with very successful business people. I worked with billionaires. You know, the one thing that the most ridiculously incredible, the most ridiculously successful people have in common is they always try to go to the number one draft pick. When I worked with the Dalio family office, their term for it was find the most believable party. And the
Huh.
oldest recipe for success is really find someone who's already successful at what you're trying to do and then either copy them or get them to mentor you. And so these individual buyers, because of the internet and because of social media and AI, they're just getting snippets of information versus saying, hey, I'm going to find someone in my town who's bought 5 businesses. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ask to meet with them. I'm going to ask to take them for coffee. I'm going to ask them to mentor me. I'm going to ask them questions, see if because people by and large are happy to help, as opposed to getting all this little tidbits of generic information or attaching themselves to these, self-anointed gurus selling these $10,000 programs. Do it the old-fashioned way. Roll up your sleeves, get your fingernails dirty, and find someone who's going to help you and mentor you. And there you'll be more successful because you want to learn the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. Well, and something you said to me in the green room and I'll be honest, it surprised me a little bit, but it was also encouraging. And you said buying a business and being an entrepreneur is doable by anyone.
Absolutely, 100%. Not, yeah. Why would you find it? You said you found it surprising?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that think, maybe that was true 40 years ago,
More
50
true
years
now.
ago.
I'm doing this 36 years. It's infinitely more true today than it was 3 decades ago
Okay. What makes it more true today?
because people have access to much more information, even though that might sound a little bit in opposite to what we just discussed, but there is access to more information. Systems, for example, software that you could implement in your business that used to be tens of thousands of dollars is now free. Communication with people, the ability to market or test market a product. You could do that in minutes versus months. When I first started out and doing mailers and that type of stuff, you could put something online. You could test a marketing program in minutes. And so all the costs associated with a business have gone down drastically. And there's also this world of commercialization, doing business globally through the internet or in social media that didn't exist before. And you can start off small. Like one of the things that I tell people, look, if this is doable by anybody, you don't have to go out and think you need to buy Microsoft. You could start off with a side hustle. You could start off buying a smaller business. You're going to make mistakes. Just try not to make big ones. You could buy, even if you're buying like a small pool route or a coin laundry or a small distribution business. Yeah, even if it break, you might not even have to leave your job. And so you could run that, parallel to that, or you maybe have to take a step back and make a little bit less money at the beginning. But, and if it doesn't work out, you sell it, you buy another one. Like these are things that are doable. People just have, either afraid to take the step, or they have these delusions of grandeur, meaning thinking that they've got to go out and buy a company that's immediately doing $10 million. It doesn't work that way. Buy something small, buy something manageable, buy the biggest business you can afford to operate, of course. But there's so many businesses. There's so many businesses now that are service related that don't even have employees or have a couple of employees. The overhead is really low. I mean, this never existed. When I first started out, and to your point, you always needed an office. You needed an assistant, and you before you even got going. You had big expenses, and any business you bought always had what it seemed like too many people and overhead. It's just a very different world today. And so to me, it's infinitely more doable. My son is graduating next year. He's been saving his money. He does some work on the side, saving his money like crazy. And his goal is he's buying a business. Like he's just saving like a maniac to be able to put some money down on a business. And it's not because, his connection to me or whatever. He sees it's doable. I deal with thousands of people who bought businesses. It's absolutely doable. You just got to do it the right way, but it's doable. And it's way easier than it used to be.
Well, that's encouraging. Richard, this has just been amazing. We could keep talking. We're going to talk about Hong Kong. Never even got into that. But
Bad, because it's one of my favorite subjects. Yes.
But how can people reach you?
Very simple. If my investment banking business is Roy Street, ROYSTREET. It's roystreet.com. There's a contact form on there if you want to get a hold of me. Just mark on there that you please send the inquiry to me directly. But it's roystreet.com. And then even simpler on the buy side, those courses that you alluded to, it's richardparker.com. And same thing, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, happy to get on the phone, help anybody out. To just use the contact page for that, and look forward to hearing from some of your listeners.
Well, thanks for coming on Fiduciary Alchemy.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Fiduciary Alchemy, the coolest financial podcast you're likely to find. We go looking for voices like the one you just heard because I want you to dodge the mistakes that I made and learn it without the coma, without the drama, without nearly paying the man. I don't know why I lived when so many others died. That part's still a mystery. Now some folks ask, Craig, what is it you do? Well, I'm telling you now, that's no mystery at all. We solve hard marketing problems in crowded markets so good folks like our guests can rise above the noise, become visible, memorable, irresistible, and grow like never before. If organic growth is your problem, reach out, call me. Let's make a plan and bring your next steps into the light. But don't leave yet. Stick around a minute more and listen to Bluesman Grendel and the Compliance Choir deliver a word of caution just for you.
This podcast is for information, education, that is all. It is not financial, tax, or legal advice to guide your call. Nothing here's an offer. Nothing here's a buy or sell. No recommendation, no solicitation. I'm saying it plain and well.
Plain and well. Plain and well.
Past performance ain't no promise of what tomorrow brings. Markets turning, people lose on all kinds of hopeful things. Every investment carries risk. Principle can fade away. What works for one won't fit us all. That truth is here to stay.
Fade away.
Fade away.
Here to stay.
Yeah, that's the compliance blues. Lord, the compliance blues. Get your own financial, tax, and legal help before you make your move. That's the compliance blues. Your situation's yours alone. Your needs are not the same. Different facts and different goals can change the whole damn game. So talk to somebody qualified before you choose your road. Because the weight of every money move is your own load to hold.
Your own road.
Your own load.
Your own load.
Well, that's the compliance blues. Lord, the compliance blues. Get your own financial, tax, and legal help before you make your move. That's the compliance blues.
Informational only. Educational too.
Get qualified financial, tax, and legal advice that is right for you.